I'm Meggie Ochoa, a Jiu-Jitsu national athlete and an advocate against child sexual violence. Today, I'm going to talk about purposeful pursuits in the perspective of sports. You'll see how sport impacts individuals, communities, and society as a whole. Now, let's begin with the story of an individual, which is actually me, the story of my life. Before that, let's look at this short video to show you what my sport is. And I'm sure that not everybody knows what Jiu-Jitsu is, so let's watch this video. Okay, I hope that was helpful to help you understand what I do. Jiu-Jitsu is actually a grappling sport and it's really more focused on the ground. Unlike other martial arts, the discipline that I do has no punches and kicks. And you also saw in the video that there are also submissions or joint locks, which can actually make you win the match. You're probably wondering why I chose this sport in the first place. I know it looks painful, but I promise you, it's more fun than painful. You should try it. Well, to help you understand my reasons, I'll introduce to you this guy named Kyle Maynard. He actually doesn't have legs and arms, and I have trained with him, and in our sparring sessions, he has tapped me out several times. That just goes to show how beautiful this sport is. It's so inclusive because any body type can do it. And me, I'm only 5 feet small, and you can't really see, but yes, I'm that small. And this was the sport that I found had variations of techniques that actually suited my specific body type. And that actually helped me accept my body for what it is. Here in Jiu-Jitsu, whether you're big, you're small, you're short, you're tall, or even if you don't have legs and arms, you can do this sport and find a way to be able to maximize your potential through the techniques that can be done. And another thing that I love about this sport is the fact that even if you're in the bottom, it doesn't mean that you're losing. If you remember in the video that you watched earlier, the person on the bottom actually was the one that tapped out the person on top. And that kind of an idea is something that is, I think, unique in most martial arts or most sports even, because mostly the idea of being on the bottom means that you're already losing. But I think that particular mindset helped me a lot, not just on the mats, but also in other aspects of my life off the mats. And because of my love for this sport, I decided to pursue it full-time back in 2014. I resigned from my full-time job and I had this big dream of becoming a world champion. Problem was I didn't really have any money at that time. So what I did was I actually engaged in crowdfunding back in 2014, and thankfully people actually donated funds to get me to the IBJJF World Championships in 2014 and in 2015. And because of the support of everybody, I was able to bring home the gold medal, which I really cannot claim as my own victory because that was something that everybody was part of. And what a great ending to my story, right? Just kidding. It could be a great ending, but this is really just the beginning because it was after that victory in 2014 and 2015 that I started to ask this particular question. Purpose. What is all this for? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Honestly, at that time, I didn't really understand. Why am I spending other people's money for my own dreams? And that was June of 2015 when I asked that question. A few months after, around November of 2015, I was browsing through the internet and I came across this article on CNN, and it was about this girl, and from the age of 12 to 16 years old, she was raped 43,200 times. When I read that article, I was in shock. I didn't even know that that was humanly possible. A child to go through that amount of pain and trauma in her life. And the reason was because she was actually recruited for child sex trafficking. And so I looked up the broader issue of child sexual violence since I couldn't sleep several nights after reading that article. And I saw how it actually comes in various forms. There's child sexual abuse, which usually happens at home or with people that the children actually know and trust, and commercial and online sexual exploitation of children, which actually involves income, but of course is still abuse because children are not supposed to experience this in the first place. And the more I researched about it, the darker this reality became. And I found out that in our country, it's actually quite rampant. 1 in 5 children experience sexual violence from the age of 12 to 17 years old. And the age of consent in our country is one of the lowest in the entire world. 12 years old, a child. And if that's not even bad enough, in 2016, we had been tagged by the UNICEF as the global epicenter of online sexual exploitation of children. And these are things that we do not want our country to be known for. But it's not just that. These things show us that children, countless children in our country experience this kind of pain and trauma in their lives. After finding all of that out, I met this family. I spoke to the mother of the family because I teach their children jiu-jitsu, and I shared with her my burden. And I found out that their family was burdened for the same thing. The month after that, December of 2015, somebody gave me a book on purpose. And that person didn't even know what I was going through at that time. The crazier thing was, the family that I met was studying the same book at the same time. And so we got close and we studied the book together, and the mother shared the gospel with me. And that was when my entire life and my entire perspective changed. That's when it became clear to me that everything that happens in my life has a very intentional purpose, because we were created by a very intentional and purposeful God that made us in a very specific way for a very specific call, which is for His glory. So those titles, that question that I asked, the article that I read, the book that that person gave, the family that I met, and the fact that they were studying the same book all pointed to Him and pointed to the answers to my questions. And after going through all that, that's when I started to think beyond myself and see how I could possibly impact the communities around me. And so I started to volunteer for Philippines Without Orphans, which is the organization of the family that I met. And they introduced me to Safe Haven Community Center and Children's Home, which is a home for abandoned, neglected, and abused children. And so our jiu-jitsu team started to teach the survivors jiu-jitsu. And of course, we did it in a way that was very sensitive to the trauma that they were going through. And that was in December of 2016. Less than a year after that, September of 2017, they already started competing, exceeding our expectations. In almost every single competition they joined, they would bring home medals. But beyond that, it's the way that these kids fight that's really moving. They do not give up no matter how difficult the situation. Because in jiu-jitsu, sometimes it seems impossible to escape, but you just have to take the right steps and you'll see that there is a way out. And I saw how the sport has really helped build their resilience. And it's not just their resilience on the mats in competitions, but they were able to apply that even off the mats. So these kids, they have to face their perpetrators in court. And for someone that has gone through trauma, that's another thing that's very traumatizing for a child. And so what we did was we actually simulated a competition during their court hearing, and we had a pep talk like how we would do it during competitions, and I even gave them honey, which is their pre-workout whenever they would go out there to fight. And after that, they were able to speak for themselves in court. And that was when they faced their real opponents. To me, that kind of a victory is more important than any world championship title. If that's not even amazing enough, when we had a goal-setting session with these kids, you know what they said was their goal and their dream for jiu-jitsu? It's actually to teach other children jiu-jitsu, kids that have experienced similar kinds of trauma. And when I heard that, I realized that the changes that were going on in these kids' life were so beautiful because these children experienced unimaginable pain, but they were capable of thinking beyond themselves, and even thinking of sharing what has helped them to reach out to the children that are still in need, that are still suffering. And it's because of them that I was able to think about the bigger society that could potentially be impacted because I had been blessed by this platform that could reach out to more. And that was how Fight to Protect was born. Fight to Protect is a movement that fights against child sexual violence through sports. The way that we do that is by using sport as a platform, because we know that sport is something that interests people. It's got a captured audience, and we use that interest factor to pull people in, and then we raise awareness on the issue and we lead people to move and to act. Later on, I'll give you guys examples so you understand more. We also use sport as a tool for the restoration of victims and to build them up from victims to survivors and eventually advocates themselves. Here are some examples of how we use sport as a platform. We usually organize sports-based events like martial arts competitions or workshops, and we also invite experts to talk about the issue during those events so that the attendees are made aware about what's happening, but we don't want them to stop at awareness. And so we also invite organizations that actually do something about the issue. And so when the attendees are moved by what they are made aware of, immediately they are given opportunities to become part of the solution. And so that way, we use sport to be able to pull people together and work together as one against child sexual violence. During the pandemic, sadly, there are strong indicators of increased incidents in online sexual exploitation of children, or OSEC. The Department of Justice declared that they had received a 264.63% increase in cyber tip reports when they compared March 2020 to March 2019. And the International Justice Mission also identified potential reasons for this. OSEC is actually a largely family-based crime, and so when the kids spend more time at home, it's actually more dangerous for them because the ones that are recruiting them for this kind of abuse are with them in their homes, so there are more opportunities for abuse. Also, even the perpetrators are online more now, and it creates more opportunities for this to happen to children. And so we could not stop moving during the pandemic. And so we started doing online events, still using the sports platform. An example is Sweat to Protect, which is an online workout fundraiser supporting Project SAFE. SAFE stands for Support and Awareness to Fight Exploitation. This is a project done by Nazarene Compassionate Ministries who really work on the ground and do preventive efforts. And that's not really our expertise, so what we did was we used the platform that we had to be able to raise funds so that they could reach more families. And out of that, we were able to raise almost 700,000 pesos and reach 2,315 families. Through these efforts, the reach of Fight to Protect has expanded. A community in Ormoc actually started their own version of Fight to Protect. A local Jiu-Jitsu team and a local nonprofit partnered up to be able to empower youth advocates through the sport of Jiu-Jitsu. And these youth advocates were the ones that raised awareness in their own communities. Aside from that, the Jiu-Jitsu International Federation gave opportunities to talk about Fight to Protect in Korea and Australia. And because of those speaking engagements, a community in Germany raised funds for Fight to Protect, and we were able to buy mats and equipment and have competition funds for the children that we teach. Have we already impacted society as a whole? I don't think we're there yet, but of course that's the dream and that's what we are working towards. And yes, growth is great. But through these experiences, what I have come to realize is that even more important than growth is taking it back to the individual. The individual meaning asking yourself, who am I becoming out of all these efforts? Am I still doing it out of pure intentions? Or is it already being mixed with ulterior motives? Am I doing it out of love and care for the children? Or do I just want to make myself look good? To be honest with you, I went through these struggles because the more I thought about expansive growth, the less I thought about the actual children. The individual also means the actual human beings that you are helping. How are they now? Are they in a good place? Because if they're not, then there is no point. Before I end my time, I'd like to share with you a very recent development in this journey of mine. Just last month, July of 2021, we welcomed a new member into our family. One of the survivors that we had been teaching since 2016 is now with us, and we are now fostering her. And to me, even if Fight to Protect does not grow as big as we hope it to be, as long as she flourishes, then I've still lived out my purpose. Sport is my avenue to live out my God-given purpose. It's the tool that I use to help build up victims of child sexual violence to survivors and eventually advocates. It's the platform that I had been blessed with to get people to move, act, and do something about a very heartbreaking issue of our world. What is your purposeful pursuit? I hope that you discover what has impacted your life and use that to impact the individuals around you and eventually the communities and even society as a whole. But let's not forget to always take it back to the individual, because that's where it starts and that's where it ends. Thank you so much for your time and your kind attention. I hope you have a good rest of the day.